Hello, this is a video on how to play the board game Battleship. Now, Battleship is a game of strategy, and it's very old. It dates back to before World War One. So it's a very old, very well-known game. You have probably seen board game adaptations of Battleship. In this case, we're playing in an online version. But all you really need to play Battleship is a pencil and two pieces of paper. One for you, one for your opponent. Battleship is a two-player game, so unfortunately, if you have more players, you will have to play a different game. So, that's the rules, or I guess the basic background out of the way. Now let's still sort of get into how to actually play the game. Now, Battleship has many variations. There's many ways to play. You may know your own ways to play. You may have your own variations. And so you could easily employ them here. But what we are going to do here is do note that each game can vary in the number of ships we use. In this case, we're using 5 ships here. But you could just as easily use 6. You could use 4. It's totally up to you. And a common practice is to have 5 ships. And that's typically a standard way to play. Remember, since it's your pencil and your paper, you can set the ship sizes to be whatever you'd like. You can play with as many ships as you'd like. Here we'll be playing with 5 ships. And so just as, I guess, sort of, just to establish what each ship is. So this long one right here is the aircraft carrier. It's 5 squares long, as we can see here. If we just simply count, right, there's 5 squares there. Then we also have this next one here is the Battleship. That is 4 squares long. The submarine and destroyer here are both 3 squares long. And the patrol boat is 2 squares long. So those are the relative sizes of the boats. And so we'll see why that's important later. But each player must secretly place their ships on a grid of 10 columns by 10 rows, right? Essentially, a square that's 10 by 10, right? And each player hides their placements from the other player because that's the whole point of Battleship, right? And so these represent the location of the ships on the battlefield. Each player will also be in possession of a second grid of the same size, where the first grid is their own ship. So the first grid contains their own ships. The second one, which is blank at the beginning of the game, is a mirror of their opponent's battlefield, right? So a mirror of the I guess the battlefield where their opponent's ships would be, but are currently hidden. So we'll see what we mean. So let us first place our ships. There's a strategy to this, but I'm just going to place them for the sake of placing them. We'll turn our ship here. I will place our aircraft carrier right there. We'll place our battleship right there. We'll place our submarine like, I guess so. We'll place our destroyer like so. Finally, we'll place our patrol boat right there. So we have all 5 of our ships deployed here. And so now we simply have the actual game board here. And so now let us sort of just play as we normally would. So once it is determined who will go first, right? So you randomly pick. That person picks a square at random. So they call it by their column and row number, right? So in this case, it's not too much of an issue since I can simply click on a square. But if you were playing on real life, let's say you wanted to. So this is my perspective here, right? I'm sitting on the end of this board here, and so I'm looking at my opponent's battlefield, and their ships are hidden, right? So I have to pick the empty grids. So let's say I wanted to place an attack on this square right here. So I would call it by its column and then its row. So this is C, this would be, so this is the third column and the second row, right? So the second row is B, so I'd call B3, right? So this is, these rows have the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J designations here. And the columns have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 as their designation there. So let's say I wanted to hit this square right here. This is in row C, column 6. So I would say an attack on C6. One more time. If I wanted to place an attack here, I would say this is row I, column 8. So I would say I8, an attack on I8, right? Or just simply call it I8. And so this represents that I'm firing a missile directly at that square, right? So I8. And so notice what just happened there. We had some water, right? Because imagine this to be ships, right? So we have a little water animation there. So if the opposing player has any part of one of their ships positioned on this square, they must call hit and mark on their battlefield which part has been hit. Equally, the attacking player will place an X on their blank grid. Okay, so this is sort of complicated here. Notice how we saw water splash. This means that there wasn't a hit, right? And so notice how my opponent targeted that square right there. Now, if my opponent were to hit any of these squares right here, then I would call hit, right? Because my aircraft carrier is part of that square. So essentially, if you hit a square and your opponent's ship is currently in that square, then your opponent says hit. Similarly, if they hit one of your squares and one of your ships is currently in that square, then you call hit. And so now this is I guess the only sort of complicated aspect of the game. So on their battlefield, right? So let's say, so on my opponent's battlefield, let's say this was a hit, he would place, he would mark it, right? So typically the actual board game comes with markers. If you're playing with pencil and paper, you could maybe just put a dot, but essentially he'd mark it on that square to say that that square has already been hit, right? Similarly, I would place an X on my grid here, right? So the opponent would mark on his grid with all the ships currently there. The opponent would mark on the grid that they have been hit, and I would mark on the blank grid. I'd draw an X there, or I'd place a marker there, just to remind myself, hey, I've already hit that spot, right? So there's no point of hitting that spot again, and also to tell myself, hey, I've hit that spot. Maybe I should hit the squares around it, right? Because I know that each ship is at least 2 in length. So if I hit the squares around it, I'm guaranteed to get another guaranteed hit. Now, so let's continue playing to sort of show what I mean there. So I'm going to attack. In this case, I would call out C2. And I got a hit there, as you can see. And so let's just to know what happened, right? So I called out C2. My opponent would then yell hit. It says player here in computer there, which is confusing. This is basically saying the player is going to attack on this board, in this case me, and the computer is going to attack on this grid right here, which is the grid that contains my battleships, right? So player doesn't denote that this is my grid. This is my opponent's grid. Player denotes that I'm going to attack on this grid. So notice how I got a hit there. So in this case, if we were playing in real life, my opponent would yell hit, and they would mark on their own battlefield containing the boats where they were hit, right? Just so they know what boats they still have, how many, I guess, lives they have left, essentially. And I would mark it, right? In this case, I can mark it with an X. In this case, the machine has marked it orange. And so now I know that there's no point of hitting that square again, right? I've already had a hit there. Similarly, I've already hit this square again, right? So that's marked sort of darker. So you sort of keep track of the squares where you've had hits. In this case, we're keeping track with the color orange, and we're also keeping track of the squares where we have had misses. In this case, we're keeping track with the color gray. Now, if you have a hit, you continue. You don't lose your turn. You continue until you miss. Okay, so if a player gets a hit, they continue until they miss. And as soon as you miss, it's the other player's turn. So let us continue playing. Sort of. So we had a miss right there, right? So he had a miss right there. That's my turn. I'll attack right there. I had a miss right there. I know, right? I know. Okay. So he had the battleship there. Oh, so he just got 3 hits on the battleship? Okay. So notice how my opponent got a hit on my battleship and they continued playing, right? If you get a hit, your turn doesn't end. And notice how my opponent marked it with orange, right? And I would also mark it on my own to denote that. So notice how my opponent marked it with orange, so they could see which squares they've had hits and misses. And I've similarly marked it on my own. In this case, in the bottom left here, I've simply kept track that, hey, my battleship only has 1 life remaining, right? Because it's already been hit on 3 squares. It only has 1 square left, or 1 life left remaining. So we simply continue playing. I'll simply continue playing like so. So I've destroyed their minesweeper, right? Or I called it a patrol boat before. Maybe I got the names mixed up. My apologies. But we destroyed the minesweeper, and based on here, we know that the minesweeper is only 2 squares. So it wouldn't make sense for me to continue hitting any of these other squares here, because I know the minesweeper is only 2 squares long. So let me hit another square. So now that's a miss. So our battleship has been sunk. So we continue playing. I'll hit another square there. Not having any luck really. And so it's a game of guessing, right? And so you sort of use the hits and misses to make educated guesses about where the ship might be. We haven't hit this back left corner here. I'm thinking there might be a ship. So we're not doing so well right now. We do not have the lead, simply because they have taken down our battleship versus. So that's 4 squares they have taken down versus 2 that we have taken down. So we simply continue playing. As you can see, it's not too difficult. So now they hit the minesweeper. So now what my opponent will do is they'll try to hit this square, and this square. Once you hit a square, you know that there has to be another hit on any of the 4 adjacent squares that are touching it. Right? So our minesweeper has been sunk. So now we're not in a good spot really. Okay, we got a hit right there. We got another hit right there. We got another hit right there. We have destroyed the enemy's battleship, right? So we got a lot of hits there, so that was good. So we simply continue playing. We have a hit. Okay, so now I think my aircraft carrier will go down. Okay. Yeah, so my aircraft carrier will go down the next turn. Okay, we got a hit right there. Nice, another hit. Nice, another hit. Right, so you simply keep hitting the adjacent squares. And you really know. We have destroyed the enemy's aircraft carrier, right? So that's nice. That's great for us. Let's hit maybe this square right here. Okay, no. So it is sort of, I guess there is a random aspect to it, but it also is a game of a bit of strategy, right? So we're sort of neck and neck right now. But essentially, hopefully you can see the game's not too difficult. So I guess the person who goes first does have some sort of an advantage in that and that they're able to, I guess, get an extra shot. So now we've pretty much lost that ship as well. So that's unfortunate. And I'm just not sure where this next ship could be. So we're not in too good of a spot right now. I'm really not sure where this next ship could be. So we're struggling, but we simply keep guessing as we go. Um, so yeah, he's about to get my ship. Seems like. Oh, okay, now. Okay, where is this ship? This is really confusing. Okay, we got one right there. Okay, so we know that the next ship is right there. Okay. Okay, so it has to be right there. And okay, we've destroyed it. So we both have one ship left. And just looking based on here, I'm not too sure where it would be. But as you can see, the game's not too difficult. But we'll just finish it up here for the sake of it. Okay, so we found it. And I think we got the win here. So we've won. So that wraps up how to play Battleship. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.